So when we are doing our work, we do this with many partners, and we have to. And I think this is one of those areas. Everybody says it takes a village, which of course it always does. But I would say the issue of human trafficking, both sex and labor trafficking, is particularly true for because the survivors that we assist have wide-ranging needs, and the survivors themselves are, could be a toddler, could be an elderly person from another country. And so you can't really have one agency handle everything. And we do that and rely heavily and lean heavily on our partners and they on us. So thank you for all of you who are here and have worked with us and we're working with, and we would like to work with also going forward. We always want to keep this piece in here about rural areas. With the misinformation that's out there about human trafficking, too often people think it does not happen in rural areas. And of course, human trafficking, sex and labor trafficking happen in all areas. Also, community education, for a while, because we have webinars where, 500 people register. People think that's all we do, is the outreach. And we have trained over 26,000 people since our inception almost 12 years ago now, if you can believe that. Oh my gosh. And you all are part of it, by the way. But we do this training in service to survivors and helping our communities that we're all in to understand what trafficking is, what it isn't, and if you suspect it, what to do. If you think someone's being groomed, you'll know more of what to do. It's really to help all of us be in greater service to survivors and to the efforts of preventing both sex and labor trafficking. So that's why we do the community education. It's really rooted in services to survivors. And anything we do too, we're happy to tailor it to you. Graciela and I did a training this past week, 2 days ago, for 40 doulas in our community. And you know how great that was? I mean, these women and one man actually are there to help women when they're pregnant. And they came to us and said, we've seen some sketchy situations that we want to talk to you about, but can you do a training? So we made a training specific to our doula program at Capital Area Healthy Start. So that's the kind of thing we do. So next slide, please. So I want you all to know we've got a lot of free stuff for you. Past webinars. If you go on our website, you will see under the resources tab every single webinar we've done. You've seen the last one we did on familial trafficking. We've done one recently only in Spanish. All things that you can take advantage of. Please download them, use them. If you missed any of them, know that you can, after the fact, email us. Email Tiffany at surviveandthriveadvocacy.org, and we will send you a certificate. So that can count toward your professional development education, all that. So know that those past training, and they're all great. I mean, I'm amazed at our speakers, really. They continue to absolutely challenge, amaze, and keep us wanting more. So take advantage of our webinars. Use them if you do lunch and learns with your agency. Do whatever, but know that they're there. We also have toolkits. We have a youth and caregiver toolkit. We have a toolkit for agencies. If any of you are in nonprofits and want to use our materials and you want the artwork, just let me know. All you have to do is just send me an email and say, I want to adapt this for my agency and my community. Great. All we'll ask is that you give STAC some kind of acknowledgement, and then you can use it, and let's all benefit from the work we've done and leverage each other's help and services. So that's what we're all about. Know that we curate stuff from other parts of the country on our event page. So all of these webinars are always going to be there. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, do that. So you'll get that info. Just go on our website and you'll see the prompt to sign up for the newsletter. But also know that we've got events coming up from the Human Trafficking Legal Center. We have all kinds of things that I promise you, they are curated. They are only trusted sources that are up there. And you can take advantage. Heal Trafficking, the healthcare sector, excellent organization. They're having one. We put that up on our website. So know that they're there. I try to only put stuff up that's free because we know the times we're in, and that's important. So know that there's more. Okay, next slide, please, Lisa. We also have a podcast, and Yeah, I made this joke that I'm like the world needs another podcast, but I believe this is a very important podcast that we only talk to survivors, and we're talking to survivors so they can help us really know more, do better, understand what we can do to prevent trafficking. If you, oh, thank you very much, Dana. The podcast is great. The last one, Daniela Dees. If you haven't listened to Daniela's story and conversation that we had, just know that it is something that you should take full advantage of. The very first one, Liz Kimball, is great. Katie it talks about trauma. We've got all kinds of, individuals, labor and sex trafficking, male and female, that you can learn from. So know that those are up there. And I also want to say, sometimes I get emails after these programs, but if you are a survivor or know of a survivor, we are not doing these for folks to tell their stories of the worst stuff that's ever happened to them. We're here so that survivors, and especially survivor advocates as well, can come forward and just make us smarter. So know that that's there. Thank you very much. Graciela just shared. Daniela D says, wherever you get your podcast, subscribe, rate, and review, as they say. Okay, next one, please. All right. So I said everything was free. It doesn't mean it doesn't cost anything. It just means you don't have to pay anything. So also when you subscribe to our podcast, there's no cost to that. So sometimes when you see subscribe, they're going to charge you something. We don't do that. That's just so you get the email when we drop another one. So your gift makes a difference. If it's $5, if it's $500, we're in tough times, and we've had a grant kind of be frozen on us through no fault of our own. We're making it with the help of our friends. So you're our friends. If you have the ability to support our work in any way, we will be grateful to you. All right. So today we have some returning speakers, and I wanted to also make a point that Christina and Florencia have spoken on this issue in the past, but it's been 2 years and lots has happened. New laws have passed. We've learned more and gone deeper in our work. And so we are absolutely delighted that both Christina and Florencia are going to be with us today. Both of these very smart people work with the International Rescue Committee, IRC, and the Framework Technical Assistance Project. Framework focuses on labor trafficking. You'll find out more about that. Let me just tell you, first of all, Christina Bailey. Christina, we go way, way, way back. I know this work started with you when you were a teenager, and that's when I got to meet you over 20 years ago, working with the Human Rights Center at Florida State. So it's absolutely delightful to see, and a part of your bio I feel a connection to. You've been connected with STAC. We have co-case managed cases when you were in that position for the IRC. We were working closely with you and loved it. And are now, now here you are, you're a program coordinator for Framework and have done many other positions. So as we talked about, I'm giving you all the slightest of slight introductions, knowing people can read your whole bios on our website, but know that Christina is super smart in this area. She's done this work for a long time, and she has a full heart of commitment and dedication to survivors. Absolute heart, head, gut, all that stuff that they talk about on Ted Lasso. So Florencia Dominguez, similarly, we've had the honor of working with you, Florencia. You are an anti-trafficking technical advisor and supporting the IRC and this project as well as many other grants. So Florencia, thank you for all you do. You've been working with in this field for a long time. And even though we are miles away, you're down in Miami, we're in Tallahassee, I feel always connected with you. And thank you for all you've done. You've been on many of our training programs, and you as well. Super smart and brilliant in this area, everybody. You will thoroughly enjoy hearing from these two women. And one of the things to intro the topic of forced criminality, I wanted to say just a couple of words. Some of you may not have heard of this this phrase, forced criminality. when I started to hear about it, it started to make so much sense instantly, because what it is a form of labor trafficking where traffickers use the tactics of forcing someone to commit a crime as part of their labor. And they could be being labor trafficked or sex trafficked. And this is also a form of the labor trafficking. So that means that they're committing crimes that they, in their minds, and when we were in law school, they said mens rea. Do they have the mens rea? Do they know this is wrong and they're doing it of their free will? No, they're doing that because someone has said, I'm going to kill your baby if you don't, or hurt you, or call ICE, or name your threat. So somebody commits a crime, and that means that the law, they're the ones that are on the hook. They're the ones that are on the closed circuit TV. And that means law enforcement is faced with a decision on whether or not to take action, whether or not and how to respond to somebody that they see committing a crime. And likewise, in the justice system, a prosecutor, do they have all the information? Does everybody have the information to know this person is actually a victim of trafficking and not committing this crime on their own? Does a judge understand it? Does a public defender that's assigned to that victim understand it? And I'm hoping now, and I'm guessing, and I want to thank too our public defender Jessica Yeary, who helped us get the CLE credit, 2 hours, by the way, 2 hours of general intermediate credit and criminal law trial credit for you all lawyers, which is great because everyone in the justice system has to understand this. They're going to talk a little bit about expungement. And every time I hear expungement, I think, I'm so glad this law is there. And gosh, I wish this law didn't have to be there. Because if people weren't arrested, then they wouldn't have to have their records expunged. Then they wouldn't have to have a criminal history that they have to worry about that'll stop them from getting a job or being a nurse or whatever. So I'm going to get to the program now, but just say thank you to everyone who's here. Thank you to law enforcement and anyone in the justice system who's here, because I have to say you have a super important role to play.
Thank you, Robin, for such a wonderful introduction. Yes, we go back way to when I was a teenager. I'm also based in Tallahassee, Florida. First worked directly professionally with Robin when I was with the IRC Tallahassee office. We worked, as she said, directly serving survivors, and yeah, been in the field professionally for 7 years now. Worked through IRC with the Tallahassee office, and then with headquarters overseeing our programs in the US, and now with the Framework Project. So again, we are going to be speaking on labor trafficking and forced criminality, understanding the scope, trends, and response. Myself and Florencia are speaking. I'll go ahead and give Florencia a moment to kind of share a bit more about herself, and then do my little bits and pieces of housekeeping before we jump in.
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Robin and team, for the opportunity to share space again with you. We do go way, way back, but I was not a teenager when we met. So, but anyways, it has been wonderful going through this experience with all of you, right? And this journey in different roles, different positions, different things. And what we see here is that when building a response, we need more in the community, a bigger village, more expertise, and we need to be learn as we go, and that doesn't change with time. So it's always good to be accompanied with great people, dedicated and passionate, as my colleague here and the team at Stack. So thank you again. I went with in the anti-trafficking field for over 13 years. I started as a caseworker, managed different federally and privately funded grants, some dedicated to labor trafficking, some dedicated to all forms of human trafficking. What else? I moved to HQ with IRC, where I also provide technical advice in anything related to trafficking to unaccompanied children under the home study and post-release services, in which this topic is also very, very relevant on forced criminality and unaccompanied children as well. So again, very happy to be here and share space with all of you, and I hope we stay connected.
Perfect. So today's learning objectives, we have 3. First, we want to make sure that you leave being able to recognize the definitions and the different trends of labor trafficking through the means of forced criminality. We want to make sure that you understand the challenges and opportunities of forced criminality. And we want to make sure that you know the response and services after identification of labor trafficking through forced criminality. A little bit more about Framework. I know Robin gave a very small little introduction. Framework is currently the OVC Office for Victims of Crime federally funded training and technical assistance program that serves, it's nationwide. It's a national OVC federal award. And it is called, the formal name is Framework Tools to Combat Labor Trafficking. We usually just go by Framework. We have kind of, we're the, I would say, the hub for training and technical assistance on all things labor trafficking. So our goals are to increase collaboration of labor trafficking professionals, kind of like you all here that are attending today to learn more, improve service delivery to labor trafficking survivors by providing that training and technical assistance to OVC federally funded programs that serve survivors directly and others across the nation. Hopefully, our training and technical assistance overall improves service delivery that they then provide to their survivors. And we hope to enhance anti-trafficking programs by supporting intentional and sustainable survivor engagement. So, Framework, our deputy director is currently on parental leave. But our deputy director is a survivor and very intentional in how she has always led the Framework project. We also contract with many survivor mentor experts that help with trainings, material creation, overseeing things. So yeah, we really like to enhance survivor engagement across the board. But yes, what is your field of work?
You are getting some answers in the chat. So, independent living specialist, child welfare, peer support, mental health counselor, child abuse investigations, and child welfare. We have a registered nurse on. Hello, Nicole, community integration specialist. From the PD's office, program coordinator working with food pantries, Second Harvest. Great, Brittany.
Yes, so many fields that are not directly in anti-human trafficking, but that obviously do cross over and could very well come across survivors of labor trafficking and forced criminality. So that's amazing.
And I see also custodial workers that sometimes that position you have great view for identification. Also, I see because I talk a little bit on company children, I see a couple of HSPRS home study post-release caseworkers working with company children as well, which is great.
Wonderful.
All sorts of expertise.
Well, I mean, yeah, our next question is, do you work with youth? That sounds by some of these job titles that many of you do. But yes, this could take maybe 10 seconds. Lisa, a quick yes or no if you interact with youth. Would be lovely. Okay, so way more yeses than nos. 75% yes, 25% no. Wonderful. Okay. Well, getting into our presentation, but forced criminality can and does happen to youth and children and minors. So very glad that you are here, but it does, of course, also happen to adults. So if you do not work with children, this is still very relevant. All right, we wanted to kick this off with a quote from one of our past consultant, survivor leader, survivor expert, whatever term you want to use. She says, as a survivor of both child sex trafficking and child labor trafficking, the artificial hierarchy of trauma created by gaps in service and legislation is incredibly harmful. I was labor trafficked in the Sacramento region as a child, separately from when I was sex trafficked. One form of trafficking should not be considered more severe or in need of services than another. The current status of legislation that ignores the equally urgent needs of child labor trafficking survivors, endorses cruelty and child abuse, and wholly disregards the egregious torture of children. So we like to start with this just as a reminder. Again, we are a federally funded program that focuses on and whole purpose of is labor trafficking. I think many of us in the field know that there is often a disconnect or kind of a hierarchy, as Sabra said, that sex trafficking equals human trafficking. I think a lot of people forget or don't even know that labor trafficking exists as a form of human trafficking, and therefore within that also exists forced criminality. So we like to start with, again, a quote directly from a survivor of both. to put emphasis on the fact that both forms of trafficking exist. Both forms of trafficking can also coexist. It's not one or the other or one over the other. All right, forced criminality, definition, and trends. Again, I'm sure most of you here, if you're attending, have likely attended some type of presentation in the past, either with STAC or otherwise. But the TVPA, federal law, defines severe forms of trafficking in persons. There is sex trafficking, labor trafficking. Both are recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person. For either, sex trafficking, a commercial sex act, which is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, unless that person is a minor. Force, fraud, or coercion does not need to be present. Labor trafficking is for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. So again, forced sex or forced labor. We are mainly focusing on labor trafficking here today, of course. And we're going to quickly listen to, I'm going to hit play. You should be able to make sure your volume is up. Listen to survivor speaker James Dold, who did experience labor trafficking and forced criminality. So we're going to share his video now.
This context, it's really important to understand that when people are forced to commit crimes, that is a form of labor, right? So when we say labor or services in the human trafficking context, it's not necessarily that those things have to be, strictly legal. Those can also be illegal things that the Department of Justice or prosecutors can then use to sort of charge traffickers with forcing somebody to commit a crime, which is a pretty common occurrence for many, many trafficking survivors across the country in both the labor and the sex trafficking context.
Awesome. And this came from this clip soundbite is one of many on our website that I will speak about later. But if you would like to, I'll leave it up for just a few seconds. I know oftentimes when you're in a training or a presentation, it's no phones allowed. In this case, please do use your phone, keep your phone out. We do have quite a few QR codes throughout the presentation. I know Robin will load and share the presentation for you to be able to access afterwards. But if you'd like to go ahead and open the link now, and you can just kind of have the tab open for later reference on your phone, please go ahead and give it a scan. I'll give it a couple more seconds, but it will take you to the full webinar that this soundbite is from, that has quite a bit more on forced criminality. Overall, forced criminality, in very layman's terms, is using that force, fraud, or coercion to compel someone to commit a crime. As the prior survivor noted, it doesn't have to be legal labor or services, right? So oftentimes, again, if we are speaking of labor trafficking, we're thinking of forced employment, forced, legal labor and legal services. And I think because, of course, forced criminality is exactly that, criminality, a crime, illegal, most people are usually not thinking that you absolutely can force someone to commit an illegal act, a crime, and that be a form of labor trafficking, correct? So in very layman's terms, forced criminality is simply using that force, fraud, or coercion aspect of human trafficking to compel someone to commit a crime, illegal labor services. And in many cases, LTFC, labor trafficking by forced criminality, and sex trafficking intersect, as we kind of spoke about with Sovereign, etc. Victims could be coerced into committing crimes such as theft, forced theft, drug, weapons dealing, or even assault, while also being subject to sex trafficking. So it can also intersect with just sexual abuse. It can intersect with complete sex trafficking. You can definitely be sex trafficked and labor trafficked by forced criminality all at the same time. And as I said earlier during our poll, children can also be both labor and sex trafficking victims, as well as by forced criminality. And it could manifest as a singular instance, just a forced theft, a forced one-time drug deal, or it could be multiple. So sometimes we have worked with survivors who were part of a gang or a group of some sort, and they were forced into repeated acts of forced criminality, repeated drug dealing, repeated theft, repeated weapons dealing, etc. Some trends on forced criminality that we have seen is, again, comorbidity with child abuse, sexual violence, gang violence, and other forms of trafficking. Often targeted would be our most vulnerable populations, so youth and children that are in the welfare system, immigrants, LGBTQIA populations. 33%, as you see here, of Central American and Mexican unaccompanied and separated minors reported actually leaving their home country due to gang violence. And oftentimes in that gang violence were aspects of or full-on forced criminality. Many victims, 83%, reported that they faced arrest before they reached the age of 22. 67% reported experiencing times of unsheltered homelessness. And 56% reported being under 18 during the trafficking, with the youngest that was reported being just 7 years old. And 47% were identified as a parenting youth. So a youth that was also now a parent themselves. And this, the link to this report that this came from will be on a slide at the end. So you'll definitely be able to read the full report of identified trends. Some more Polaris national data. So many survivors were polled by Polaris in 2023, and they reported being criminalized prior. 28% reported being criminalized or arrested or involved with the law in some way. 28% reported that it happened before they were ever exploited for labor trafficking. 81% reported it happening during their exploitation. And 42% reported it happening after exploitation, but oftentimes still connected to the exploitation that they experienced. Here you can see as well another QR code if you want to take your phone out and grab that link for later. It will take you to that national data that we were referencing from Polaris, but you can see kind of the offset here. So 81% being arrested during exploitation, versus the 19% that were not, and all arrests related to exploitation were 54%, so over half. Get back over. Some different types of forced criminality. I know we've touched on some of these, but it could be forced theft. Again, oftentimes maybe related to a gang, or your trafficker would like you to go steal, and they use, any type of force, fraud, or coercion to convince you to do that theft for them. Robbery, ID theft, forgery, weapons dealing, drug trafficking and sales, any type of gang activity, illicit marijuana cultivation, Sicario jobs, and even recruitment for sex trafficking. So oftentimes I think recruitment for sex trafficking gets lumped into sex trafficking, but technically when you're recruiting, that's labor, that's a service. And if you are being forced into now recruiting others to be sex trafficked, that is a type of labor trafficking by forced criminality. And again, just kind of shows how sex trafficking and labor trafficking by forced criminality can intersect. We have definitely seen that situation with some of our survivors where they kind of were forced by their trafficker into recruiting others for the trafficker. I've also many times seen drug trafficking and sales being reported as forced criminality, usually by a gang, so usually intersecting with gang activity, as well as weapons dealing and situations of theft is what I personally have seen most often with our survivors.
And Christina, also someone, sorry,
Oh, please.
someone put an example of forcing scam sales on the
Yep.
phone. Yes, we see it with the peddling. There's not peddling on the criminal activities, and even when we are talking again, and you talk about the recruitment for sex trafficking, at the end of the day, sex trafficking ends is labor trafficking, right? And so is the intersection, and we see that commonly. And then when we talk about sex trafficking, our brain is more used to the fact that it's a legal crime, but that is a legal activity, but the person is a victim, and we don't see it with other crimes, right? So that's what is important to have these conversations.
Absolutely. No, yes, absolutely. And we have also seen situations of survivors reporting forced I don't want to say forced begging, but forced, on the
Yeah,
Yeah.
streets, forced, what is that forced begging? I believe that's actually the proper term, maybe. I guess
Or
peddling.
stealing. Yeah,
panhandling. People say
Yes,
panhandling.
panhandling. Thank you. Forced
hmm
panhandling. We've actually also had reported by survivors that they were forced to basically, yeah, panhandle and beg for money on the street, against their will. Again, that's a type of forced criminality. And you might drive
Um,
by and then not realize it, right? So go ahead, Robin, please.
exactly. Someone has asked, what are sicario jobs? And that was in the Q&A. So thanks for that question.
and I can go. It's a term. I don't know if it's in what slang from which country,
Yeah.
but basically, and this is one of the most controversial forms
Mhm.
of forced criminality, is when you are contracted to kill someone. And we have
So,
seen this with gangs, not only here but abroad, but also in cases of youth and kidnapping and forcing the youth to commit these types of crime. If not, there is a severe punishment, and those are one of the most controversial. Um, when the victim is a victimizer, and is one of the most severe, but it does happen.
yeah. So essentially, again, in layman terms, a forced hitman. Um, so I've oftentimes, again, also intersected with gang activity. Might be the leader of a gang that the youth or even adult gets intertwined with and is forced to, unfortunately, end someone else's life.
Someone's also mentioned an interesting scenario too about forcing substance abuse patients to work and giving programs almost all of their benefits. So we have seen where traffickers do kind of force people to turn over their benefits, whether they're
Mhm.
disability or other kinds of benefits. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's a form of that coercion and control that starts with, a grooming process.
Absolutely.
But it's kind of one of those things that is a form of labor trafficking. The forced criminality isn't mentioned in this comment, but I just wanted to get in the idea that that's another crime that the trafficker is committing if they're taking the benefits.
Absolutely. And we've definitely had survivors report, because oftentimes during intake, you're going through needs, you're going through what resources are already available to you. And oftentimes we've had reports of, oh, I receive, food assistance or et cetera, but I don't have my card. The trafficker still has it. Or, I never had access to my benefits. My trafficker held and used those, and things like that. So yeah, absolutely great thing to note. Thank you so much. Again, I can't see the chat, so I don't know who said it, but thank you very much. And I'm going to hand it over to Florencia. Since I'm controlling it, Florencia, just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide.
Thank you. Yes, and again, when we're talking about forced criminality, there's human trafficking itself is extremely complex. When we add the topic of forced criminality, then it gets even more complex, right? So it gives us not only a new set of challenges or recognizing uh, challenges that were always there, but also it gives us new opportunities to open our minds and gain new perspectives, and also opportunities to work together and see how do we approach if we want to continue build into an anti-trafficking response that is holistic and comprehensive of all survivors. Oh, next slide. So we want to base this conversation on the fact that victims and survivors are protected, that were forced to commit forced criminality, as you saw, are protected by the law, right? And within the government and the statutes and things that we will go over, we wanted to share these from policies that so to set the tone, right? That this is not us or service providers trying to advocate. This is within the law. and we are trying to act within the law to provide services to all survivors. And it says here, a victim-centered and trauma-informed approach is key to successful anti-trafficking efforts. A central tenet of such an approach is that victims of trafficking should not be inappropriately penalized solely for unlawful acts they committed as a direct result of being trafficked. And this was published in the 2024 U.S. Department of State TIP report. Next slide, sorry. So when we are talking about this, right, the basis, all this conversation is the non-punishing principle for survivors of trafficking. And again, in which it says that trafficking should not be penalized for unlawful acts committed as a result of the trafficking. Now, what I wanted to say here, no, go ahead. I'll say it later. Sorry. So some of the challenges that we have with when we are trying to address in recognizing or protecting or serving victims or survivors of forced criminality is very complex and very robust. One of the things, and I'll talk a little bit more later, is the absence of a protection system, especially for children. And the absence of protection can be applied to all, but especially for children, which are extremely vulnerable to forced criminality. Also, forced criminality is a very lucrative and low-risk enterprise within the human trafficking scope. That's why it gathers traction, to put it that way. One of the biggest challenges is that society and all we might end up treating victims as criminals, the lack of identification or awareness that this even exists, the lack of clear definitions. Believe it or not, for example, now the forced criminality, now we are talking more and more. In the US. In other places in Europe, they already have, when labor trafficking by forced criminality, a separate definition under human trafficking. And it has been already recognized for years. Whereas for us, we are starting, right? I guess this process, and this is why these conversations are so important. Again, the trafficking, manipulation, the impunity, again, the fear of authorities of coming forward and that the retaliation, the bias with the police response, and I think response overall. And I wanted to talk a little bit more on the absence of the protection system, especially for children, right? When we are talking about forced criminality and protection, what we are talking about that we need to protect in all areas. And Robin touched about it at the beginning, right? Like prior even incarceration or arrest. So why would children, for example, engage, and we'll hear a little bit more about this, but why would children engage in forced criminality, remaining in forced criminality, have issues exiting, and why they might re-engage? Because of this lack of a protection system, right? Engage, it tends to be for the lack of safety, economic, or relational support needs that a child or someone in that with that vulnerability may have. The exploiter may provide a sense of belonging and protection, which the youth might be lacking. And again, it might not have a lot of an external support system or trusting adults that will prevent him to engage in this type of activities or believe in the exploiter. And they might remain in the situation, again, not only because of the normalization of the environment, maybe it tends to be also that once they're in, they see what am I gonna do now? Now I'm in, I don't know how to get out. Definitely because of being forced, coerced, or uh, under threats to be in that situation, and they don't see the alternative as what is the option, if how do I get out of this. The exited, we'll talk a little bit more about the barriers to exit, but what we are seeing sometimes with youth is the re-engagement on some sort of exploitative settings, again because there is not a support system for them to rebuild their life, and especially with forced criminality, when we have survivors with criminal records, cannot find a job, cannot find a safe place to stay, so basically they need to find other ways to survive. And overall, and to continue a little bit on the challenges, and we talk, and this is for all, right? The housing insecurity, poverty, economic reasons, the immigration status that might prevent someone to engage in legal work, language barriers, dependency overall. Sometimes we see our children in the dependency system might be more prone to, once they escape or look for that sense of belonging outside, family abuse, not having that familiar support system that we talk, disability, people exploiting peoples with disability, exploiting the shame that goes accompanied not only with human trafficking in general, but with forced criminality. And we talked about that lost cause feeling, right? If even if I get out, how do I restart my life when I'm seen as a criminal? Um, that loss of hope. So given some of the challenges that we heard and the vulnerabilities, and thinking ahead on opportunities, what do you think could be some of the opportunities in your field of work to address this issue, or to continue to be proactive in building a response uh, against labor trafficking by forced criminality?
If I could do a little commercial, as you're talking about youth and forced labor and labor trafficking, I wanted to just highlight that last month we did the program on youth and labor trafficking, and it was familial trafficking focused. And because we see so much more familial trafficking these days, it was a really excellent program. So I put that in the chat, everybody, for that.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, let's
Okay.
see.
I'll
Safety
go
and
ahead and the poll. We have about looks.
So
No.
it looks like we're seeing, do you want to talk to, can you see these,
yeah,
Flora?
I'm seeing some chat ones, Florencia. Safety and building a strong support system, more advocacy and support sources and reassurance, continued education. So for you as the service provider, advocacy and coalition building to address the issues and concerns, safety education and support, seeing the signs of a person experiencing this, and then being aware of resources for this particular issue. So both, yeah, identification and response. Great.
And I see a lot of, safety planning, psychoeducation, advocacy, which is great. And I think, honestly, just the fact that we are here, right? That's the first step, because believe it or not, like years ago, we couldn't, there's not a lot of, it wasn't, people weren't
Talk about.
talking about
Yeah.
forced criminality, and it took some time to build the conversations around labor trafficking. Is a great time. The momentum forced criminality, labor trafficking by forced criminality is getting, and just the fact that you're taking time to learn about this and being here, I think that's a great step forward. And the fact that we can share these type of trainings and things with the rest of our um, colleagues and partners, I think that's the first step.
Absolutely. I love this one. Looking beyond their label as a victim or survivor and treating them with dignity and humanity.
Absolutely.
Someone's agency has a whole safe hotline and a trafficking division to represent survivors. Yeah, again, more safety planning, more advocacy and support. Amazing. Thank you all.
Providing a safe place to open up. All of these are great things. Yes, we can move forward. So you all show great showcase some great examples, and additional opportunities is again recognizing it first, responding. When we're talking about recognizing, a lot of times even the survivors themselves may not recognize that we're reinforced. They internalize that they're criminals, and they don't understand that what grooming might have been, why they were committing certain crimes at the age of 13, 14. So again, recognizing not only us and responding, but helping people recognize it in their experience as well. Improving the legal and administrative shortcomings, again, to make it less stressful and maybe remove roadblocks that we can consider, for example, forced criminality as an option before treating the victim as a criminal. Train law enforcement and stakeholders, because it's not only law enforcement, it's judges, it's service providers, is everyone that needs training, right? Collaborate with regional partners, international partners as well. Increase awareness on expungement, because not all states have, well, now with the federal, we'll talk about it, but no, expungement tends to be underutilized. I'm not sure if someone has the records here in Florida and want to share that, but it tends to be underutilized resource sometimes because of the roadblocks. And I know in some parts of Florida they do a great work in facilitating that, and they do clinics to help survivors with their expungement of records. Improve the job and housing for those with a criminal history, because again, we don't want people to rejoin exploitative situations. So when you don't have a job, when you cannot get a job and you cannot get safe housing, nothing else can be built. And again, restorative justice as well.
I wanted to quickly share, Florencia, in the chat, kind of going along with this training and collaborating. Someone mentioned that they've experienced other providers stating that a trafficking survivor still needed accountability for crimes they committed because they were not understanding the impacts of forced criminality. So they said training and education about forced criminality is incredibly important, because there are unfortunately still providers out there that don't recognize
Right.
forced criminality and think survivors need to be held accountable for their crimes that they were forced to commit.
And I will say quickly in terms of, of that when we are talking about accountability, the guilt and the need for mental health support is absolutely a must. Um, and again, we'll talk about it. But one of the things is when we are talking about expungement and at the federal level and at the state level, we're talking for crimes related to a trafficking incident, right? So it's not a free for all. So they're not saying that people shouldn't be held accountable, but there are things that were committed due to the trafficking incident that is strictly related to that. And victims are definitely accountable, and the accountability may come in form of mental health services instead of incarceration for those crimes related to the trafficking incident.
And you know what, as you're talking, I'm thinking there are two questions that we might put out to you both now to talk about, if that's okay, that came through the Q&A. So, and they're both insightful, great questions, and they're a little bit, nuanced. So let me read them for you. And it is, can you speak to the importance of accurate identification of the form of trafficking? How do we balance the nuances that come with each type, avoiding re-traumatization when working with folks, but continuing to ask questions when one form of trafficking has already been identified so that qualifications have been met? So maybe they've identified sex trafficking, but to continue to talk to the survivor about labor trafficking might be re-traumatizing, and what to do. And y'all, I want to recommend, Christina had the QR code up for the video. the survivors talked about this thing, and they talked about the opposite, which is if only one form is identified, they feel like they have not been seen. They feel like their life experience has been negated. Part of their now, not everybody's the same, so don't I don't want to go down that road either. But asking about further, things that happened is not always re-traumatizing, and failure to ask could be re-traumatizing. That would be my first reaction to that question. What do you think?
No, I would definitely agree, and I think it's going to be important to have a good screening tool and be using a good screening tool, like a screening tool that is asking the right questions in an appropriate manner and focusing on all forms of human trafficking and not necessarily a screening specific to only sex trafficking and not only a screening specific to labor trafficking, right? So, and also just a lot of information, at least from my experience, is going to just come out in regular conversations. So I think it's going to start with rapport building. Again, in my experience, most of what I found was not during intake, or not found, most of what I learned was not during intake, was not during screening. It would be just through conversations. How was your day? What did you do today? Any random conversations that would come up just while we were holding small talk while, printing papers or looking up a resource, things would come out. And they didn't realize that they were even really sharing this information because they didn't realize that that was what we're looking for, right? So it's just coming out in conversation, and it's kind of our job as the advocates, as the service providers, as the mental health providers, whatever our job title is, to know what to listen for outside of just a screening or an intake appointment, right? If you want to kind of always have your ears and mind open and listen for those little bits and pieces of information, because someone might say, yeah, like last year I was in this wild situation, and my trafficker, told me to go steal from a store and I didn't want to do it, and then he made me whatever, and then you're sitting there, and that's, to them, they might not realize that they're explaining that they were a victim survivor of labor trafficking and labor trafficking by forced criminality. To them, they're just telling you about a situation that happened to them, and then it's now our job as trained as trained service providers to hear that and say, oh, okay, this is going to open the door for me to breach that concept and that topic of labor trafficking and forced criminality. Yes, hidden confessions, essentially. Correct. Thank you.
Yeah. And the other thing, I'm going to put both a lawyer hat on and put my lawyer hat on and also my survivor advocate hat on with some of these things, and just tell anybody who's an attorney here, because you're getting your CLE credits, work with local agencies. Like, what I am sometimes frustrated by is for a survivor who comes to STAC and says, well, my lawyer's doing this and that and this and that. And what we want to say to any lawyer is, if you're representing a survivor, ask them, and they're working with a nonprofit agency assisting them, talk to those advocates at that nonprofit agency, because we will have had probably many of those conversations. And if the survivor consents, then we can share information with that person's consent about, well, you're covering labor trap, that they were forced to do this thing, right? Or, that's connected to this other thing. And so I think that sometimes we don't see that collaboration happening. So that's what we would make a plea to all the lawyers is, don't forget your local services organization with
Absolutely.
the consent of your client, always.
Absolutely. And mental health providers, I mean, because things might come out during mental health sessions. And again, I mean, yes, with consent, and consent forms can be very detailed. Please only share the information directly related to my situation. You can, the survivor has full control over what they allow providers to share with each other. But it's a great place to start, because things may come out with different people. You may tell your survivor advocate, your service provider caseworker something that you didn't share with the attorney, or maybe you told your attorney something that just didn't come up with your caseworker, or maybe during a mental health session you shared something that hadn't been shared with the other party. So
Yeah.
oftentimes, again, this having this collaboration and sharing with your survivor, hey, with your permission, with your consent, we would like to be able to all collaborate because that is also a form of not re-traumatizing. We don't want you to have to tell the same thing to me and to your lawyer and to your counselor and to your job seeking employment assistant person. So if you sign this form, again, with your consent and very minimal information shared, we would like to at least collaborate and share information with each other that's going to benefit your legal case and the services provided to you. And that can be another form of not having to re-ask something that maybe another provider has asked them already and not having them share something they've already shared with 3 other people, kind of on their team previously. And I know
Such a
Florence, you wanted to share something as well, so I'll let you.
Yeah, such a great point.
Can go to the next slide, because as part of the response, and I'm not sure who asked the question, if it was before we get into the video, I'm not sure if it was a service provider or not, but what I will always say when in terms of identifying type of trafficking as a service provider, I look for need. I first assess for need, right? What is this person that I have in front of me needs right now, even to have the conversation. And then as a service provider, for me, is irrelevant in the sense if it was sex trafficking or labor trafficking. But in terms of resources, like when we're trying to identify the type, is because of what is not to put it in our data to help our data in some way. Is I need to identify the type because it will provide me additional resources that this person needs at this time. So, for example, for an immigration attorney, the conversation will take one way, while a criminal attorney needs to know this information in order to provide better services, especially when we're talking about forced criminality, right, and preventing the person to go to jail. And an immigration attorney may want to know the type of trafficking, so the immigration attorney can make a case towards the T visa. So again, when it's not necessary as a service provider, we provide the services, we identify mental health, we let the person, like Christina said, have the conversation, we build rapport, and all the information we get is with the sole purpose of connecting the person with the right services, and not so much for data for our records. But in some cases, some fields, they might need that specific determination for services, and if we can assist and collaborate across agencies to alleviate and people don't have to repeat themselves, that's what we should do. And that's part of the response. This section that we are going next.
I hate to do this, but I'm going to do it. I have to ask this
Yes.
question because it flows and it might connect, but also that we can start the conversation because we do the whole rest of the time on this one question. But here's the question: that there are times when a person is arrested and claims to be in a forced criminality situation, appears to be telling the truth, but can be too afraid and traumatized to cooperate with law enforcement. What are your thoughts on how the prosecutor or detective can handle these situations with sensitivity when the defendant's attorney won't allow further interviews of the defendant or the likely victim? So this sounds like a kind of very specific situation that might be very happening right now. And I want to say that you as a prosecutor can talk to the attorney and know that just like everybody else, the defendant's attorney may not have understood that this was under forced criminality. I mean, I would say a defense counsel who wants to learn how their client might not be arrested or charged would probably be interested in talking to you about it if they understand forced criminality. We can't impute that every defense counsel is going to understand this, right? So the first thing, I would talk to the attorney, pretty carefully and even share some of these resources and say, hey, if this is going on with your client, the last thing we want to do is arrest them and prosecute them because they've been forced into this crime. So I would try to talk to the other counsel, but this might be a situation, it's very common, and I think, Florencia, you said it, is that someone might be very reluctant to talk to law enforcement because it's so traumatic. So how do you handle that situation?
It's extremely tough, right? That's one of the complexities. But one of the things that I can share is that we had actually a public defender reaching on behalf of the client to us to assess the and in this case, we couldn't get it to talk to the person, but the public defender wanted to get trained on forced criminality, because for her, and it was a she was proactive. She reached out to the local anti-trafficking agency and tried to get proactive to how to have those conversations. Extremely challenging, and I think a lot of the if the person doesn't want to talk, I think the best bet is for the attorney, either prosecutor or public defender, try to find an ally with a service provider, and again, handle the conversation, or if allowed to have the conversation or do any screening, to put it that way, or something like that that might be able to back up, the information. I think. Yeah, I don't know how in these cases how long people have to build rapport, really, right? And another thing is, yeah, people don't want to come forward with anything, especially in different times, in different people don't want to come forward with anything or ask for help or getting in. Yeah, it's extremely challenging. I would say try to partner with a local advocate that maybe can help manage
Yeah.
the connection.
And you know what? There are a couple of other questions, but I'm going to stop so you can proceed with the program because we're at 2:10. And so let me save these. Just those of you who have asked, we're going to save these questions if we get time at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Florencia, I'm going to go ahead and press play.
Yes.
Or do you want to do an intro to it? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So no, please listen. We'll do a quick exercise after. But I just wanted to say, if you are interested in this topic, please research Xavier McElrath Bay and his story, because in this video you won't hear much of his story, just a little bit, of it. But just so you know, by the age of 13, he already had more than 15 arrests at 13. And his situation was very, very challenging. And today he's not only an amazing speaker, but the executive director of an organization, and designed several programs in advocating for wrongfully incarcerated youth and against forced criminality.
If you Google his name, he has TED Talks and all kinds of things out there. But we're going to hear about a minute and a half from him now.
Well, so I just want to really restate something I mentioned earlier, and that is that I was oblivious to the fact that much of what I was experiencing was a form of victimization. Much of what you said earlier today, James, that much of my actions were based upon the most basic and fundamental human needs, and those were the needs for love, a sense of belonging, purpose, and naturally found that amongst my friends, but found this very colorful entity. And what was really, I felt initially, especially, was a wellspring of support. What I felt initially was a source of protection in a very violent community, was a source of protection from a very abusive stepfather who hesitated at nothing and beating us, hitting my mom, and kicking our dog. Was a source of protection from all that I felt was threatening, because I felt that sense of belonging and safety there. And so for me, being unaware of how, in so many ways, while I was seeking the emotional rewards and feeling those emotional deficits in my life, while I was going through the day-to-day of those experiences and not being aware of how, having the inclination or the sensations of fear, or even just the feeling as though I don't want to do that, but not really having a choice. I thought that came with it. I thought they came with, I thought I was, in some ways, this was a part of it.
And as you can see, the complexity again of it for him, right, for a child. So really quickly, and if you want, put it in the chat, what are some of the barriers that you think prevent Xavier from exiting? right? Because from the outside, sometimes we might think that we judge and we said, well, the person committed this. Why didn't he exit the situation? And I'm reading, I'm seeing the chat. Exploited providing a sense of comfort, the lack of awareness, losing community, right? The emotional part of it. Dangerous to exit, manipulation, the feeling of hopelessness, the sense of safety and belonging within this group that even wasn't a positive group, is the only family that he felt he had, right?
I don't know if you can see lack of awareness, losing community, exploiter provided a sense of comfort, a skewed sense of normal, fear of violence. I say it also as a lived experience. Okay. I think that was to an earlier comment. It's dangerous.
And someone put it there, where to go back to. His home life was a threatening environment already. So nowhere to go back to.
Right. No, yeah, he said, and he had that feeling of, I don't really want to do this, but
what am I gonna do?
It was still better than going back to his abusive stepfather and whatnot. Trauma bonding. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Meeting his needs, was trying to meet his needs and did not realize that what he was doing was criminal.
We can go to the next slides. Well, we can do this one. Yep.
Yeah, it's quick. This is
quick. This is under a minute.
Aisha is 15 years old and has been part of a local gang for 3 months. At first, everything was great. Aisha felt safe with her boyfriend, who is a gang leader and a part of a powerful community. Lately, things have been changing. She and her boyfriend spend more time with girls who must have sex for money. Aisha helps by collecting money and running errands for the girls. Aisha's boyfriend asks Aisha to start recruiting new girls from her middle school to prove her love for him. When Aisha declines, her boyfriend becomes violent. He pushes her against the bed and calls her dumb and useless. He says that if she doesn't find new girls, she'll be the one working, or he'll tell her family that she's been pimping out girls, which is illegal.
And this is another example, right, that we see with sex trafficking, that is also labor trafficking by forced criminality. And again, why can they leave forced criminality? Definitely for the traffic is benefits, but is the violence that will maintain it in control. They will face, is not that the grass is not greener for sure at the other side, right? There is no hope. It's not greener. There's they feel, they internalize that they're the victimizer, or they're criminals. So they don't see themselves as victim either. Trauma bonding, which several of you mentioned in the chat. Debt bondage, and we see that, for example, in some cases with immigrant youth as well, in the case of gangs, and of course the fear of law enforcement and coming forward, not trusting the system in general. We talked about these very, very, very complex, and that's why we are here, to try to take some of those fears away and have the conversations. Now, this was research by Polaris, and one of the things that when we are talking about recovery or joining once they exit the exploitative situation, of the 174 survivors that had a criminal record, 69 reported that they couldn't get a job, they couldn't get a professional license, they couldn't get safe or good housing, or they couldn't get, 35% of them couldn't get custody of their children, and that's a whole other issue. So again, it does affect the future, the total future of their life and their process for stabilization and recovery. Next slide, please. We were talking about indicators before, and a lot of times people, again, don't recognize trafficking in general, labor trafficking even less, and forced criminality, sometimes even less. One of the things as service providers, if we have youth missing too much from home or school, that could also have unexplained acquisition of money or phones, clothes, more engagement on phone calls, and like quick messaging and stuff like that. Talking to older individuals, running away from home and coming back without explanation, suspicion of assault or harm, unexplained injuries. There might be having weapons. Again, these are a mix and match as with everything in trafficking, but we wanted to share some of the indicators with youth: self-harm, increase of substance use, and significant changes in emotional well-being, again, to cope with some of these actions. Next slide, sorry. Back in January of 2026, so very recent, we have the within the Trafficking Survivors Relief Act. There is a under the federal law, expungement of record for survivors of trafficking that committed crimes due to a trafficking incident. Again, that means that there, even in some states that may not have expungement, as a national legislation, the survivors can have representation. Again, the nuance again is that it has to the record has to be related to the trafficking incident. And on the Florida expungement, so again, allows a human trafficking survivor victim to petition for expungement of the record. You can ask for more than one record. And again, we are talking again about the crime has to be related to the trafficking incident, but it can be more than one record. Next slide. Sorry, a little bit more on that. Again, it's not limited to prostitution-related offenses. So again, crimes, even if it's not under human trafficking, okay, you can go for expungement, not only for prostitution like people used to think before. It can be for other crimes under labor trafficking, forced criminality, for labor trafficking by forced criminality. Again, it allows for multiple cases. And basically, the law, in the bottom takeaway is that the law at the national level and in Florida recognizes that criminal conduct may be part of a survivor's victimization and not separate from it. I see, sorry, a great question about if there's funding on legal process, and we can talk about resources a little bit later. But in Florida, there's agencies that do expungement clinics once in a while. I can try to find that information and share with you, but I don't remember exactly in which counties. Why this matters, what expungement matters for survivors, and why it's important for us to learn about it and pursue it, and try to pursue it, connect with someone that can pursue it. Like we saw on the statistics, it affects recovery in general. It affects the future of the victim and survivor. So again, it prevents education, housing, employment, professional licensing, and economic stability overall. If they're jumping from job to job because they cannot get a good job because they have that lack of that criminal record, and especially if they're continuously if the person feels that they need to explain to every job or every housing provider why they have that criminal record, right? If we expunge it, also they need to stop getting re-triggered and trying to explain for it. So again, this remedy that is specific for human trafficking shift the lens and the perspective as to why did you do this, or explaining the treating the person as a criminal, as how this particular conduct was connected, why this behavior or conduct was connected to their trafficking situation. Again, forced criminality should trigger identification and assessment and not automatically disqualify someone from being recognized as a trafficking survivors and receive services or proper treatment. And again, we invite you to continue the conversation. We to keep being interested in the topic and think what you and your organization can do to educate, prevent, identify, and properly respond to the issue. There's amazing people in the audience that know much more than we do on expungement and things over. Also, please connect with one another and definitely follow the conversation. And we are here also to respond to any questions. And Christina, I pass it to you.
Yes, thank you. I know we are coming up very close on time. You guys have been great in the chat at giving us lovely questions and engagement to discuss and chat about. But yes, definitely connect. Reach out to, if you already have a legal partner, just reach out to them. Hey, what do you know about expungement on forced criminality? Is anyone in your office doing this? Is there another office you could connect us with, etc.? And just keep that going with your agency, with your networks in your area. I want to very quickly go over some resources and references. The very first being, you all are the first to hear about this. We just made it live this week. We have a brand new kind of learning path on recognizing and responding to forced criminality and labor trafficking. It kind of takes a lot of our pre-existing forced criminality resources that framework had and blends them together into one little learning path. So it's a very, very good way to continue learning about this, as well as if you have partners you want to learn about this, it's a great thing that you could share with them in partnership with this recording once available, to get everyone in your network kind of starting that conversation and their education on forced criminality. I don't want to sit here too long. There is a QR code. It will ask you to make an account on Kaya, which is the platform that hosts this. That account is free. It's simply kind of basic information, email, password kind of thing. But again, since this will be shared out, I don't want to sit on it just because of time. Go ahead, Robin. I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I just want everybody to know, since we're getting close on time before we go into more questions, that I have shared into the chat the CLE information for everyone, and I'm going to say it out loud so that you have it as well. It's course number 260915-8N, and as in Nancy, and the title is Labor Trafficking and Forced Criminality, Understanding the Scope, Trends, and Response. It's 2 hours of general CLE credit and criminal trial law credit. Also in the chat, I will be on tap if anybody else wants to be in touch. Just scroll up on the chat and you'll see it. So know that that's there because we're almost at time. Also want everybody to know that the next program will be on September 18th, and we will be having a wonderful presentation on local collaboration, which is always perfectly timely, with Marina Anderson from DCF, and I'll be putting the registration info on that into the chat as well. So let me just let you all get back to it.
No, you're fine. Thank you, Robin.
Okay. All right. Well, there have been a couple of here's the September program right there for you to, if you all want to register. Somebody asked if there are employment opportunities or volunteer opportunities with your organization, or for those of us who want to be more involved. I put my email and phone in the chat, thinking if you're talking about STAC, yes. If you're talking about IRC, your contact information can also go in. I'm not sure who the anonymous attendee wanted to know about it, but yes for us. And what about IRC?
We can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, feel like we can share our emails. We both
Yeah,
work in headquarters, but we do have offices across the nation. Yeah, send us an email. We'll put our emails in the chat.
I'll put it, yeah, and if it's local in Florida, they might need interns and volunteers. I think they always do. Thank you for the interest.
I am so sorry that we don't have time to answer these two questions. Let me just say quickly, one is, does a grandparent exploiting or forcing a parent to give control of their child's grandchild disability check count as forced criminality? Does it add to the force or coercion that the grandparent uses threats of making the parent and child homeless if they don't receive it? That kind of coercion sounds like it could fit into this, but we probably need to have more information. So if you're in our area and you want to reach out to me or to Stack in general, please feel free to do that and we can talk about details. And would you like to say anything else about that, Christina or Florencia?
I would just say, yeah, for the sake of time and because we would need more information and it might get very personal, maybe send one or both of us an email and maybe we can kind of treat it as a TTA and see where we can get with that.
Okay. Okay, great. There's another one about recommending if someone caught an obstruction charge because they lied on their trafficker or was denied a court-appointed lawyer. This is all a very specific case that we
Maybe
wouldn't be able
same
to.
then, yeah, send us
Yeah.
an email
So
and if it's something we can talk through with you, we will, or maybe try to connect you to someone else, someone who's better.
exactly.
An
So,
attorney, yeah.
and I think that's all of our questions. And I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question, but we're almost there. A couple more slides. You want to do the next one,
Yeah, I was
Christina?
gonna say I'll be very, very quick. This one's been sitting up for a while. You might have already read it and scanned it, but also one of our newest resources. And I know because some people mentioned being from the mental health field, we recently put out a co-created survivor guide or co-created with survivors guide on supporting the mental health needs of labor trafficking survivors. That is free, publicly accessible at this link and this QR code. This goes to
So
our
let me quick
newsletter.
say thank you to both of you. Gosh, again, another great one with so much information. Thank you so much. Everybody's saying,
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you. Wonderful. And
Thank you.
also this group, all of you attending, you were just wonderful with your reactions and with your comments and your questions. These were more questions. And I think maybe there's a lot of lawyers on here. That's my bias to say. We always ask questions. All of us lawyers do, don't we? But there were a lot of questions. We have survivor experts. One survivor warrior expert, as she called herself, is on. Really appreciate your participation. Always, always. Next month, Marina Anderson, who is one of the most dynamic speakers, will be on September 18th. So please go ahead, look at the link on the Stack website, and that I put it in the chat. And we'll see you next month. Christina and Florencia, just flowers at your feet again for all of your great work and for your great work on this one today. Thank you.